Don't tell anyone.
Don't tell anyone.
But you've possibly found the best kept secret in business. He's handsome. He's loud. He's got some tattoos. He'll tell you as it is and only wears a suit at a wedding or a funeral. No jargon, no overcomplicated 300-stage program. Just upfront, honest, proven ideas, thoughts, and strategies
That actually
work. So here's your host, the best kept business secret probably anywhere.
Ladies and gentlemen,
This is Mark Ford.
Hello again and welcome to your Best Kept Business Secret podcast with me, your host, Mark Ford, your Best Kept Business Secret. Hope you're well. Right, we're on to show 3. We're on to the third Doctor in our 13-part Doctor Who series. And who'd have thought there is so much stuff to learn from Doctor Who? Well, guess what? This one is quite a long one. There's quite a lot of lessons to be learned from the third Doctor. So let's get stuck straight into it. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 1970s. The decade should be looked as a pivot of change. 4-day weeks, 3-day weeks, power shortages, rubbish being piled high on the streets, strikes, awful fashion statements, Star Wars and colour TV. It's here that the third Doctor, as portrayed by Jon Pertwee, lost his first battle. He lost black and white TV. Progress. But at the same time, it was a sign of things to come, as this was to be one of the most turbulent periods in the show's history. There were as many highs as there were lows, and by the end of the decade, it certainly would have its wounds of maturity. So let's jump in with one of the lessons that became very apparent during his tenure, as I've mentioned it so early on. The third Doctor stories were the first to be broadcast in colour. The early ones were set on Earth due to cost constraints on the series. Now, while previous Doctor stories had all involved time and space travel for production reasons, brackets, cost cutting, which some people call keeping an eye on the money, Pertwee's stories initially depicted the Doctor stranded on Earth in exile, where he worked as a scientific advisor to the International Military Group unit. Within the story, the Doctor came into existence as part of a punishment from his own race, the Time Lords, who forced him to regenerate and also disabled his ship, the TARDIS. Eventually, this restriction is lifted, and the third Doctor embarks on more traditional time travel and space exploration stories. Now, if you were to have landed from Mars and had been told to watch the episodes of Doctor Who with Pertwee, you could be forgiven for thinking it wasn't a show about time or space. The only space element that was consistent was the planet Earth seemed to have moved up the list of the most eligible planets to rule as every Tom, Dick and alien began arriving to stake their claim. Shops, hospitals, bunkers, warehouses, streets, back alleys, quarries, caves and good old TV studios were all the settings for the next few years. This, along with personnel changes and the world changing so rapidly, altered the shape of the series and was a risky evolution at best. It had started its departure away from its core reason for being, and as time would go on, its departure from its main vision would ultimately, in my opinion, lead to its downfall. But we'll come to that later. Its reason for being was very definitely the entertainment, but Sidney Newman, its creator, had decided it also needed to have an educational meaning. Its now lack of historical stories were going partly unnoticed at the beginning of the 1970s, but there was a game changer on the horizon. The show did try to educate, but in a very different sense. Stories that reflected green issues of the time began to slip in. Whilst it was considered a children's show, it was trying to deliver a more meaningful message to the parents that sat with the children to watch on a Saturday tea time. It also began to use more and more special effects than it had ever done. Green screens were becoming common practice as the producer wanted to broaden the show's appeal. Some worked, most didn't, as looking back, some of the special effects have aged very, very badly, almost making watching some episodes quite embarrassing. They take you out of the story with such a jolt, you forget what you were thinking before they appeared. A lesson here, and perhaps a recurring theme, would be that moving away from core principles and ideas will confuse people. There are many businesses who set out to do one thing, and then as time progresses they diversify into others. This leaves the plate of the main core product or service spinning dangerously slowly as time, effort and money are put into other things that the business may well not be known for. If we look at some modern companies, the lessons are there to see. If you look at Microsoft, their vision was to have a computer on everyone's desk at home or at work. They succeeded. However, they then started looking into devices such as MP3 players and mobile phones, and it hasn't worked so well. Now, taking a look at its rival Apple, they became well known for MP3 players such as the iPod. They knew they weren't going to compete in the home or business PC market, as when Steve Jobs walked back in through the doors, they had less than 10% of the market. They then added the MP3 functionality to a phone. Why have two devices when one is easy? Those phones had useful and functional apps that made our lives slightly more enjoyable or productive every day. They then created the iPad, which was now a combination of the MP3 player, a phone, and a small laptop computer. All these devices spoke to each other in a very simple way. It isn't complicated or needs endless updates and patches. They almost filled in the blanks from the bottom upwards to the iMac. No one else got it. Right here is one of the keys to Steve Jobs' success. Apple continued to spin the plates they needed to as people progressed up their value chain of products. They also became inclusive of other software and brand names. Microsoft did not. They lost a lot of ground by not doing the simple things well, spinning one plate at a time and trying to be exclusive. You see, Apple gained the ground and overtook by spinning all of the plates properly and not leaving their core values behind. They made our lives easier. Microsoft did that once. Now I'm afraid they don't. So you can see why it's important to really think on what implications it could have on your business when you want to change things significantly or diversify into other areas of business. It's at this point I'd like to provide some fun and a little bit of balance, because sometimes diversification can happen by accident and have astounding results. In the UK, we have a lovely breakfast cereal called Shreddies. They are lovely little squares of stuff that look like they've been knitted together. In Canada, they weren't as well received, and the marketing budget had been pretty much spent on trying to make them work. That was until out-of-work comedian and intern called Hunter Somerville came along and created a sensation in an old product that led to one of the oddest diversifications. If you can imagine a square, it's not just a square, is it? No. You see, if you turn it 45 degrees, it's a diamond. And lo, the birth of Diamond Shreddies began. There are videos of taste tests with genuine real Canadian people who thought that Diamond Shreddies tasted better than ordinary Shreddies. Damn it, they were taken out of the same box and turned 45 degrees. The even better bit of this example is that someone somewhere got so upset that Diamond Shreddies had become more successful, they started a campaign to bring back Square Shreddies. It was a success. It gave birth to the Diamond and Square Shreddies multi-pack. Brilliant. Just brilliant. And it goes to show that there are no new ideas. It's just how you present them to the public. Even the mighty Apple didn't have a new idea initially. There were hundreds of MP3 players on the market, yet we chose them. They kept the plate spinning as people moved to the phones and kept them both spinning with newer, updated, faster and slicker models as we moved to the iPad and above. My question to you would be, how much harder are you going to have to work to spin your original plates as well as the shiny new ones you want to spin? Now, one of the key things that happened during the Third Doctor's time, Pertwee's Doctor was portrayed as a dapper man of action, which was a stark contrast to his wily but less action-orientated predecessors. It was almost against type, as Pertwee was very well known from comedic acting both on TV, film and radio. Here was a funny man playing things straight, whilst the previous Doctor had a serious actor playing them for comedy. It reflected a time where people wanted to be lost in an action-packed environment and forget about the world. Times were getting tough, and the free love and laid-back life seemed a hell of a long time ago, as how the country was run, how businesses were run, and how we should interact with our friends across the water were all beginning to bite. This Doctor was a premium product packed into a budget box. Velvet jackets, capes, fedoras and frilly shirts with the Doctor's signature. Here was an alien that dressed to be noticed. He was the Bond of doctors. By dressing the way he did, he gave an illusion of suave and sophisticated man with an excellent self-grooming regime, whilst underneath harbouring a rough and tumble, no-nonsense physicality. I'd like to reflect on that just for a moment. In business, we often see businesses that are as hard as nails on the exterior, but have a soft underbelly and crumble when put under pressure. The successful ones are the ones that are attractive, well-drilled, and react, cope, and deliver surprises when the pressure is on. There is way too much being relied upon when it comes to what something looks like. Don't get me wrong, it is important. It's just that it's not the be-all and end-all. A straight banana tastes the same as a curvy one. Misshapen carrots, turnips, potatoes, and fruits still taste of carrots, turnips, potatoes, and fruit. Customers and clients do buy with their eyes and feelings, but if the business, the product, or the service doesn't deliver on value or what was a reasonable expectation, then this leads to bitter disappointment and unwanted surprises. It becomes a Ferrari with a Robin-reliant engine. Looks good, but massively disappointing to drive. Don't be that kind of business. Be the Aston Martin that over-delivers, overperforms, and surprises the many and not the few. Now, talking of the many, it's well remembered that Pertwee took the franchise to the people. He was probably the first doctor to be mobbed when in public. He was becoming rock star famous. Children loved him, dads were a little jealous, and mum thought he was a little hot for an older man. Pertwee connected more with the viewing public than his two predecessors. Even after his tenure as the TV Time Lord, he would openly talk about his time on the show and would spend a lot of time talking with fans from around the world. In my opinion, this is where proper fandom began. Dalek Mania was now long gone, so for an actor to have a connection with the public could only be a good thing. It helped the show as other bigger, better and slicker shows began to appear. It's here that we find another lesson that perhaps gets lost in our technology-driven world. Back in the late 60s and through to the early 70s, we really didn't have technology, certainly not as it's known today. We sit and think that typing a few words on a social media platform is real connection. It's not. I'm really sorry to disappoint. Whilst it's great that I can connect with someone on the opposite side of the world within seconds, and yes, I'm privileged and very lucky to be living in a time that allows me to do that, does that person actually know me? Do they like me? Do they really want to connect with me? Am I a numbers game? Have I just entered a competition in a dick measuring contest when it comes to how big people's followings are? Probably. And because of that, I just become noise. When you look at businesses that have failed in the last 10 years, they've failed for many reasons, but there is a clear lesson that keeps appearing and reappearing. Connection with its customers. The collapse of toy giants Toys R Us was mainly discussed as its failure to grapple with the online battle it faced. Whilst that's partly true, I know, having talked to many mums and dads and even my own experiences, that the company lost touch with its customers. And when I put it like that, you should be staggered. You see, the biggest thing that kept popping up were the huge spaces they had to pay for in out-of-town buildings. It cost too much. It was unsustainable. Yet as I write this, one of the most popular places that are probably situated in out-of-town areas are pubs and bars with fun houses for kids. From there, some have begun trampoline parks where kids have birthday parties and just go to at the weekend or during holidays because mum and dad can have a little bit of quiet time. Here is the most ridiculous thing. Why didn't Toys R Us actually do that? Becoming a destination for kids and families to go to. It would have had a captive audience. It's just a staggering lack of thought and imagination, really, that led to Toys R Us to crumble. As a child, I loved to go there with my grandparents. We weren't rich, and often we'd leave empty-handed, but I could look at the latest toys and games, the latest figures and the latest bikes. So don't lose that connection with your customers and clients. You don't need an email list of millions or thousands. You don't need a Facebook following of hundreds or even hundreds of thousands. As author Austin Kleon in his book Show Your Work says, you want hearts, not eyes. Have 20 people that will run through brick walls for you and tell the world how bloody amazing you are, rather than 200 people that just view you as noise. Talking of hearts and not eyes, this doctor eventually gave us one of the most beloved companions that is sadly no longer with us. However, in the journey to get there, the series was once again brave and perhaps a leader when it came to its portrayal of women. His initial companion was unit scientist Liz Shaw, Caroline John, and she first appeared in the first serial of this Doctor in 1970's Spearhead from Space, having been drafted from the University of Cambridge as a scientific advisor to UNIT. She was portrayed as an accomplished scientist, an expert on meteorites with degrees in medicine and physics and a dozen other subjects. Her extensive training, however, is still pale in comparison to the Doctor's own knowledge of the universe and scientific principles far beyond those of Earth. Skeptical at first of UNIT's ability to defend itself against an alien invasion, Shaw changes her mind when she encounters the newly regenerated Doctor and becomes involved in defeating the plans of the Nestene consciousness and its animated plastic autons. Liz continues to work with the Doctor and UNIT through other adventures, where the Doctor also encountered section leader Elizabeth Shaw, an alternative version of the scientist in a parallel universe. She eventually resigns from UNIT and returns to Cambridge. There was no farewell scene on screen for Liz, with her departure simply being announced by the Brigadier at the beginning of Terror of the Autons. She reportedly told the Brigadier that all the Doctor really needed was somebody to pass him test tubes and tell him how brilliant he was. She probably wasn't wrong. But the reason I mentioned her and feel that it's correct that I talk about her is that since the first Doctor, Liz Shaw was the first woman companion to be given a strong personality and prove to people that women of that time weren't just dumbasses that always asked, "What does that mean, Doctor?" We're talking the early 1970s here, where racism and sexism were rife, yet here, admittedly for a short time, was a TV show showing a strong woman and that she was the main character's equal. A shame we had to wait nearly 40 years for that to happen again, but it proved that at some level it was ahead of its time in an era where those feelings that a woman could do the same job as a man were laughed out of the building. But perhaps they knew something about the future Prime Minister towards the end of the decade. It shows that being forward-thinking and giving people what they want too soon can be difficult. I guess we just weren't ready for this in 1970, as Caroline John was quickly replaced, and there are various stories to why, but we were immediately served up some of the same as the previous two Doctors when wide-eyed Jo Grant, Katie Manning, joined the Time Lord, who then continues to accompany the Doctor after he regains use of his ship, the TARDIS. Within the series narrative, Jo is a junior civilian operative for UNIT, and she's assigned as an assistant to the Doctor. Once he regains use of his time machine, she accompanies him in travels across time and space. And Jo eventually departs the Doctor's company in 1973 in The Green Death, having fallen in love with a human professor. As opposed to an alien one, I guess. But Manning and Pertwee enjoyed a close working relationship, and Manning felt that this added to the success of the partnership between Jo and the Third Doctor. Though her character was criticised for not being a progressive interpretation of a woman, Manning felt both the feminism was not a contemporary concern, and Jo had her virtues aside from her intelligence, such as loyalty. Her last episode personified some of the subject matters that the series was now tackling on a weekly basis. It tackled subjects such as corporate greed and chemical waste, something we still really haven't got a handle on. But in the environment of a children's weekly science fiction show, it may interest you to know that during the early to late 70s that the show attracted a 60% adult viewership. Perhaps the message wasn't going into a 7-year-old's ears, but it seems it didn't with the parents either, which is a shame. But it showed that there were levels and subjects that this show could handle with great aplomb if it put its mind to it. In a business sense, taking a backward step is fine. As mentioned, the character of Jo Grant seems like a backward step compared to Liz Shaw, and in the cold light of day of 2018, yes it is. But what was the world really ready for? Was it really ready for a woman to be equal to their male counterpart? No. Sometimes being first isn't always good. Recognising a problem that needs solving before the bigger population are ready to realise that the problem even exists can lead to wasted money, time and effort. It's a shame. Here was a perfect opportunity to promote feminism on a public platform every Saturday tea time. It just didn't work for whatever reason. Whether it was the actor, the writers, the production team, or those higher up, this was a situation that just didn't work out, and going back to what had always worked is more than justifiable. In business, it's okay to take a step back if it means you make the step forward at a later date. Not everything works, and providing there is a learning, taking a step back to take a step forward is a very good thing. Don't let anybody else tell you otherwise. His final companion was intrepid journalist Sarah Jane Smith, Elizabeth Sladen. This was for many a defining moment in their childhood. Not as openly intelligent as Liz Shaw or as stereotypical as Jo Grant, Sarah Jane Smith would prove to be arguably the most popular companion in the show's history. She would be the first companion to get her own show, and it was unfortunately just dreadful. But she was given a second chance in the franchise some 30 years later and have an effect on a new generation of children. I'm not sure where the business lesson is in this one, but something compels me to talk about something loosely based on what I said about the Second Doctor. You don't want to be the guy to follow the guy. You also don't want to go back when you were successful previously. Or do you? You see, the character of Sarah Jane Smith crossed over the Pertwee to Tom Baker time. And it's also here that companions continued in the main to cross over different lead characters, primarily to give people continuity, but also act as a reassurance that not everything was changing, even though the lead character had changed their face and their personality. It's a reflection in business that when a top management change, unless you're a football manager as an example, that when businesses change hands or leadership, that the core of the management team is kept on to see that there is continuity in day-to-day operations. It just makes it easier for everyone. But when someone leaves only to return sometimes later, that can be a gamble for both parties. The one that really worked in living memory is, of course, Steve Jobs. His return started a previously unseen stratospheric rise to dominance in business terms, and perhaps we probably won't see that again in my lifetime. On a smaller scale, it could be done. The right person with the right heart, the right message, the right skills, and the ability to see the past for what it really is. Experience, and nothing more. People cannot live on reputation alone, and as previously said about the Second Doctor, there will be as many people willing you to succeed as there are willing for you to fail. Succeed, and the fact you've been away will soon all be forgotten. In Sarah Jane Smith's case, she reappeared in the instantly forgettable Five Doctor story, but more memorably in the 10th Doctor story, School Reunion. Well written and well acted, it was like time had never passed. Because of the successful return and clamour for more of the fan favourite companion, head writer Russell T Davies gave her her own show, The Sarah Jane Adventures, where she entertained a brand new generation of children on the BBC, with a show that was full of important topics for children, mixed with aliens, space and time travel, and effectively was a Doctor Who-like programme. The character was probably the right character for the right time. Her mix of eccentric 70s clothing, her bravery, her intelligence and humour were the right balance at that time. It was the best of Liz Shaw and Jo Grant rolled into one, a strong but feminine companion, an equal and solid counsel for the Doctor when it was needed by our window into the mind of the Doctor at others. It's good for business to have. Not everyone is built like Branson, Jobs, Gates and Musk. Not everyone's leader always wants the limelight. Sometimes it's down to someone else in the organisation to take the lead and be the face of the business. There are many who have made a career out of being someone's number two, a second in command. Not every number two will do well. You just have to look at football management to see that. So when for whatever reason someone as important as Sarah Jane Smith leaves a business to spread their wings, you must let them do so with gratitude. And when they're ready to come back, or you are ready to go back, just remember what I suggested earlier. The past is just that. The past. It counts for nothing other than the experience. One of the last few things for this Doctor is that we need to talk about technology. Something that undoubtedly will rear its head again before we finish all 13 Doctors. In Pertwee's case, we need to talk about the technology the Doctor uses. The technology of colour and the special effects. All had a lasting effect, and all would have a lasting effect on your business. Firstly, let's talk about the fact that this Doctor was a proper geek. He loved making stuff. He made the Whomobile, which Pertwee himself actually owned after it had finished being used in production. A futuristic car that could fly. Wow! Why doesn't that stuff exist in 2018? But it was the sign of times, as if you look in the cold light of day, admittedly it didn't fly. But it was a part working prototype that Pertwee did in fact drive around the streets of London, gaining astonishing looks. He also had Bessie, which was a bright yellow soft top of a car that wouldn't have looked out of place with the first Model T Fords. But it was quick, probably one of the souped up cars of its time. The show began to reflect the technology and the concerns it gave people. Stories reflecting robots and computers taking over the world weren't new, it's just that people started to fear them. Some of the scariest shows, in my opinion, were the ones that followed the Autons, a villain that they would bring back for the 2005 reboot, where shop dummies came to life and killed people. People could then be replicated and replaced. It worried people, rightly or wrongly. The technology effects that damaged environments, whether they were ours or an alien planet, the message was still the same. In 2018, we have our concerns regarding fracking and digging in places we really shouldn't be, all in the name of advancement. Technology has had a big impact on how we do business now. We can connect with, go to, come from, talk to and ignore people faster than ever before. We're living in a time that, if we're honest, we don't know where it will stop. The Doctor always tried to make sure that humanity had a say in how its future is affected, and by not allowing the technology to overtake the human race. Well, perhaps now is the time to look at your business and have a conversation with yourself and your team about whether technology has taken over your business, and maybe you're now missing that human touch that we all need. You see, people buy from people. Automation is great to a point. Use technology as it's meant to be used and not to the detriment of your business position. Now, why have I touched on colour? Well, you see, colour always has been and always will be revolutionary. It can make a business look old and tired, or give the same business the chance to look modern and vibrant. How? Well, it's all down to the logos and the colours that you use. The 70s were well known for using ridiculous colours together. The first house I bought had an avocado coloured bathroom suite with marine blue tiles. I bought it in 2000, and within 24 hours I had no functioning bathroom. No chance I was going to have a bath in that. You see, colours and logos make us feel something. Something of the most famous ones in the world have actually genuinely got psychology behind them, and if it's good enough for them, it's going to be good enough for you. A big part of a strong corporate image is having a strong corporate colour. This means there is generally one dominant colour used in all aspects of your corporate image. This dominant colour is used consistently in everything you do, and it should form the basis of the business's promotional material. Different colours evoke different emotions, and it's important to choose an appropriate colour for your business. Darker colours tend to give a stronger, more established feel. Hence, a lot of law firms and accountants use dark blues, browns and even black as their corporate colour. Lighter colours tend to reflect a more modern look and feel, and they are often favoured by businesses in the creative fields. This is an area where you need to take advice from a very good graphic designer. Decide what image you want to portray and then get them to turn it into colour. Colours, like most aspects of corporate branding, can go in and out of fashion, so your corporate colours will need to be changed periodically. Just like a logo, they have a finite lifespan. Make sure the colour you choose can be used consistently in all printing and advertising, as some colours are harder and more expensive to reproduce. Orange is one prime example of this. You can end up with a lot of variations which may erode the overall strong and consistent image you're trying to portray. So, here are some examples of colour psychology. Red. It emotes strength, passion and excitement. Its use in marketing terms, used extensively in food terms to trigger appetite, conveys a strong energy and it attracts attention and adds visibility. Companies that often use it: Virgin, Coca-Cola. Colour yellow. It emotes intellect, joy and energy. In marketing terms, it's used for conveying positivity, high energy, optimism. It stimulates creativity and attracts customer attention, and it also indicates fun and a cheerful brand. Companies that use it: McDonald's and Ferrari. Blue, emoting loyalty, trust and intelligence. Its use in its marketing terms is considered the most popular brand colour, which suggests high loyalty and precision, and it's closely associated with intelligence and trust. Companies that use that one: Ford and Dell. And then you've got green, emoting freshness, growth and safety. Its use in marketing terms is considered the easiest for human vision, and it's used to protect an easy, relaxed image, an environmental image, and it's extensively used for environmental projects. Companies that use it: Starbucks and Body Shop. You see, this stuff really works because not only did this doctor have a brand new title sequence, but they created a new diamond-shaped logo at the same time, and this was to run for 10 years until 1980, at which point it was ripe for a refresh and a new design. Just proving an earlier point that as humans, we're better at accepting change quicker than you think. And the last part of this section, where the advancement in video technology. Now, I'm going to be honest here. A lot of Pertwee's era doesn't fare so well given the advancement of time, more so than the black and white episodes before them. The quality of film really wasn't up to scratch, and some of the green screen stuff was just bloody laughable. It was a programme of its time doing the best it could with the budget it had, whereas nowadays, producers and directors are smarter with what can be done and can't be done on a budget. Trying to achieve cinematic effects on a TV budget back then was never going to happen. And oddly, I see it now, but in a different way. I just don't think that we realise how good we have video technology. You see, the power of video is in our hands, or pockets, or bags, or wherever we put our mobile phones. These devices mean we can take video footage whenever and however we like. There are actual cinematic releases being filmed on iPhones as we speak. Such is the quality of the technology in these devices. So why aren't you using video to attract your best customers and clients? They don't have to be of Marvel proportions, but everyone that owns a business should realise that they also need to be their own media company as well, putting out what they want, when they want, and no longer waiting for a film crew to rock up. Now, before videographers come and throw stuff at me, not for 1 minute am I suggesting that everyone do it on their own. No, far from it. What I'm suggesting here is the behind the scenes stuff that the customers really want to see what goes on. Every company should have a video film professionally to show their clients why they're different to everyone else. It shows personality and professionalism. What people don't want to see are videos with emojis, rants and funny faces on. It does nothing for your business unless you're an emoji making angry clown. Your first set of videos will be as dodgy as hell. But the more you do, the slicker you get. The more relaxed you are, the better they become. Just don't use any model dinosaurs like Pertwee's era. And finally, we move on to the greatest of all nemesis for this Doctor, the Master. Originally played by Roger Delgado, the Master was the opposite to the Doctor. Where the Doctor wanted to live in peace, the Master wanted to tear things up, start a riot, rule a planet or two, and destroy everything that was good with anything. A man of similar intellect, devices and gadgets, even having his own TARDIS that could change into something other than a blue police box, he would usually be behind a plot of some kind of evil, only for the Doctor to interfere and halt his plan. It was a great addition to the show, and from a personal point of view, one of the best villains that the show has ever had. But from a business point of view, it goes to only highlight what I've said in a previous chapter about competition. Except this time, this type of competition should allow you to raise your own game and be better. We all need competition in business. We just do. That's why I don't get the lockout networking groups entirely. If you're scared of competition, then it's perfect for you, but not for the other people in the room. You see, we're all human. And when we're not challenged or motivated, we tend to rest on our laurels. We can therefore sometimes slip below a standard that we set ourselves. And before the self-righteous amongst you say, no, not I, bollocks, absolute rubbish, we do. We just don't openly admit it. If we have competition, we have to be on our A game at all times. Otherwise, we won't generate anything. You see, recently I sat in an event where there were 3 other coaches in the room. They all introduced themselves to the great and the good before I did, and by the time they'd finished, I'd played cliche bingo. They all came up with all the business coaching cliches that I thought were possible. My mission was to introduce myself better than they had. And I did. They all tried giving their services the big I am and you should buy my stuff. Me? Well, I stood up and briefly spoke on the demise of another local company that had fallen by the wayside because they'd lost touch with reality and hard work. And if they didn't want to end up like that, then guess what? They should have a chat with me. I filled my 3 one-to-one appointments within seconds with someone asking for a chat afterwards. The others handing their cards to each other. Competition is good. Always knowing and humbly understanding that you are equal is good and will keep your feet on the ground. Allow others' opinions of you and your business to be higher than your own. Whilst it's flattering, don't buy into the hype. The minute you start telling yourself you are better than your competition is the same moment you begin to lose connection to who you serve and what you're about. A business is not about you, but it starts with you, and in that order. The people that you serve are always first. So, after 4 years and 128 episodes, Pertwee decided to move on. After falling out of the TARDIS on his very first episode, he falls to the ground in his last TV moments as the Time Lord. An emotional conversation between himself and Sarah Jane ensues, breaking the hearts of children everywhere. And just as the regeneration is about to take place, the Brigadier utters the words, "Well, here we go again." So let's take a quick look at the summary of the lessons with the Third Doctor. Number 1. Doing what you can within a budget is a golden rule in business. There are many businesses that have fallen over by trying to do something without any real control over their budget. In this case, production costs had to be brought under control, and many of the stories were situated on Earth because it was cheaper. For its day, it still delivered a quality of sorts product. I always encourage clients to look at their costs and reduce by 10% every quarter, but without doing damage to service, the product, or the customer journey. Number 2. Moving away from core principles and values is a risk. The decade in which this show inhabited was a period of massive upheaval and change, and like its predecessors, it needed to change to stay relevant, but this was the biggest change since the show's inception. Moving away from history and scientific discoveries was a risk. In this case, it tried to make commentary on things that were becoming an issue, such as corporate greed and green issues. You could argue it was a good call, as the audience had grown up with the show and those children were now teenagers or adults, so exploring those issues was very relevant to its audience. 3. If you diversify, make sure you're spinning the right plates. Following on from the last point, in business, if you diversify or branch out into something different, it's very important that you keep the original plate spinning. The diversification may not work or work as well as hoped, so ensuring that the core part of the business doesn't topple can be tricky, but is absolutely necessary. Number 4. There are no such things as new ideas. The show had now been going 11 years, and the formats of the stories had not really changed. It was still a story over 5 or 6 parts, but it really wasn't about time and space anymore. It was more of an alien invasion type show. Yet the viewing figures were still hitting tens of millions now, and it's how you present something that is often the best way to make it look like a new idea. Take a look at the Shreddies videos and its associated videos, and I'll put the link in the show notes. Number 5. If you look flash, make sure the product or service backs it up. Pertwee had been dressed as a dapper man of action. It would have been disappointing if he'd got beat every time he had some rough and tumble, wouldn't it? So are you a business that looks good but delivers a low quality product or service? If you are, sort yourself out. If you're a business that looks budget but delivering a high quality product or service, you could be shortchanging yourself and your business. You see, Tony Robbins talks about human needs, 2 of them being stability and surprises. We like things to be how they should be. If you buy something you perceive to be quality and it's not, then you're disappointed, which leads into the category of nasty surprises. But if you buy something you perceive to be of value and it exceeds the expectations, then you are pleasantly surprised, and that goes a very long way. But as an aside, I want you to also remember this. A surprise quickly becomes standard, therefore is no longer a surprise. Always aim to exceed expectations, as it's a key strategy when trying to grow a business. Number 6. Connect on a personal level with your customers. In a world with social media, we think we are having connection with our customers. We're not. We're just playing at it. Actual face-to-face time is on its way back, folks. You heard it here first, and don't just talk to people who want to pat you on the back and say how bloody wonderful you are. Speak to the people that didn't buy, that didn't enjoy your service or product, and listen. Just listen. Because in there, buried in all the mess, are golden nuggets for your marketing and your business. Number 7. Backward steps are sometimes needed to move forwards. At this particular point in time, neither the BBC or the viewing public were probably ready for a strong, intelligent woman to be part of the programme, and for whatever reason, they chose to take a step back to type. However, when the stereotype moved on, they were replaced with not such a large leap of faith. There was a balance. For the programme, they introduced a companion that was very feminine but smart and strong at the same time. It was the combination of the last two, and that became acceptable to the BBC and the viewing public at large, as they became one of the most popular characters in the show's history. So sometimes, just sometimes, moving forwards and then back shouldn't be seen as a defeat, but more of a postponement until you find the right balance to move forward. Number 8. If you were successful once, going back to something can be a risk. I guess this is a legacy thing. People look at the past, successful times, with rose-tinted glasses, and we even do that ourselves as we like to self-edit. So you need to think long and hard about going back to something that holds a successful period in your life. The past is the past. View it as experience, and as we all know, things, people, and outside influences change. Have they changed too much for you to go back? Number 9, colours and logos. I've already mentioned that humans are better at adapting to change than we give ourselves credit for. So take a look at the colours and logos that your business uses. Do they truly reflect the business you're in or the time that we live in? And finally, number 10, competition is inspiring. If you use it, and you use it as a good way to improve yourself and your business, you're using it well. You're good. You must be, because you're listening to this. But to be better, you must always be aware of what others are doing and how you can supersede that. Remember, if you stand still, you're going backwards and failing. Don't be afraid of it. Embrace competition. And that's it for this episode of the podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed the third Doctor's reign and the lessons that he's given us for business. Before I go, a very quick shout out to, I had a lovely email, genuinely lovely email from Emma Rooms. Thank you so much, Emma, for your very kind email about this series on Doctor Who. If you want to go and check her out, she's got a great little business. Go and check her out at www.scarfmonkey, scarf spelled SCARF, monkey.com. It's genuinely, it's really quite humbling, the email that you sent me, but it's massively impressive how that you are trying to empower young ladies to dress in a more Liz Shaw way. Let's put it that way, in a Liz Shaw way. Guys, do you know what? I'd love to hear your feedback on this podcast. Any thoughts, any ideas that you've got, please do get in touch with me. If you want to email me, just email me, Mark, M-A-R-C, at markford.uk. That's mark at markford.uk. If you want to go to the website, www.markford.uk, go and see the events that I'm holding, go and see the bits and pieces that I've got going on, free hints, free tips, more podcasts, all that sort of stuff. I would love to see you there. Otherwise, come follow me. Come follow me on Facebook. Come follow me on Twitter. I am all over the place. I really am. Guys, until next week, be brilliant, and I'll see you very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
This podcast is sponsored by JB Commercial Finance, the trusted funding solutions for business. JB Commercial Finance are experienced, whole-of-market commercial finance brokers and will help you and your business raise money no matter your circumstances. Whether you're investing in your business, have cash flow challenges, or you're looking to acquire commercial premises, get in touch with us now for independent, expert, and honest advice. For a free, no-obligation assessment, find us at www.jbcommercialfinance.co.uk or call 0116-3440-322. JB Commercial Finance is fully authorized and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority and are proud members of the National Association of Commercial Finance Brokers.